stereo restorers. On my bench is another Kenwood KA2500 I'm restoring. I do a lot of these, do a lot of Sansui 2200s, Marantz gear. I've worked on most of the classic gear at some point during the last 40 years. But some of my methodology in restoring them has changed. Let me give you an explanation. This one here has 3 CAN capacitors, 3 1000 microfarad 30 volt capacitors. And then there's a 2200 here, a lug capacitor. This one I was able to find a replacement for fairly reasonably that would strap in. But here's one, for instance. I've been buying these JC Con CAN caps. This is 1000. And I've been able to use them in many Kenwoods. I come along with this one that's a little older production. It uses a taller, narrower cap. And it doesn't fit. I have some of these like just in stock here. But here's what I'm coming across. To get stuff that fits, you usually have to go to very high voltage. And the cost has skyrocketed in the last 3 years. Caps that I got for $7, $8 now are $25. And anybody that's in the business knows what I'm talking about, and they're back ordered. I just happen to have these. At one point, I would put a terminal strip like this. This is one, a factory one, but I'd put a terminal strip on the other side and mount, solder caps to find an empty space. On this vintage guy, there's not much empty space underneath. It's also not very high between the bottom panel and the bottom of the boards. So now we're looking at recapping caps. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one apart and show you the easy breezy way to do it. There's different videos on these all over the place, whether there's a CAN cap and a tube radio. So there's the original late 60s 30 volt 1000 microfarad cap. Here is a 50 volt 1000 microfarad cap. And it's one of these German ones, Worth Electronic. I've had good luck with them. 105 degrees Celsius. These are 6,000 hour caps. Anyway, here's what you got to do to get into this. We'll talk while I slice. Utility knife. Just make a nice clean cut on the shrink covering on the cap. Just near the top and the groove. Let's do that a few times. That exposes the metal here. Some of them, the other one, it was actually coming off. And there we go. Just get it pull off around the cap. These, I think, were really well made caps. Because this actually still worked. Even though it was 50 some years old, it still worked. I put my capacitor meter on this. This 1000 microfarad cap was actually working around 200 microfarads. And you'll see inside, once we get inside one of these, why they don't work so good after that length of time. And that putting it on a variac, any of those slow start techniques where people say, well, I want to reform the caps. Well, it does nothing. You're wasting your time. Put new caps in at this age. And the guy that owns this is a very fussy owner. That's me. I use this one in my own stereo. So I just go around small cutters here and just break the seal. The rubber, which used to be soft, is hard now. That's what kept the juices in. And although this worked, it did not sound great. Now, these are so dry you should be able to just wiggle it out. Well, there we go. So there's what's inside of it. And although it's shiny, it's dry. This one's completely dried up. This is useless. Putting power to this with a variac, completely useless. Anyway, we'll just put that there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean off where I pulled the crimping back. So the bigger set of cutters. I mean, you could use a Dremel to do this. Wheel and a grinder. Just don't have it fly in your eye. That's why I do these. Keeps it from hurting me. I've had a few injuries from flying things over the years. I remember one time I was dremeling, making a custom subwoofer enclosure when they were hard to get for cars. I was doing some dremeling in some metal, and a little piece flew in my eye. And I had to go to emergency, and it's a scary thing when you think you might lose your vision. I mean, you go into panic mode. But they flushed it out and everything was okay. So inside, some people throw caution on these. How can I put it? There is some very old capacitors, and I'm talking about 1920s and 30s, have toxic oils in them. These here, it's borax water. It's a salt ammonia type of thing, and there's a wax inside of it. Now if your cap fits in and doesn't bump into the wax, you can leave the wax in. I mean, there's just a little bit there, or you can knock it out. It's up to you. This unit doesn't get hot enough to cause any kind of a problem, but it's not a bad idea to have a little blowout space. Here's how I fasten it in. This is where I differ with a lot of other people on these. This is dollar store felt that you can buy. We'll take a piece just a little bigger than the height of the capacitor. We'll get this off. I used to glue them in. I used to make new caps for them depending on the value of the radio. One thing for certain, it does look good to have the original cans above the chassis. So you just wrap enough of this. Very sticky, this stuff. All we're going for here is a good old-fashioned interference fit. Now if we can get past the tar in here, so that's what you do. You get that down in there, and then you put the clamp back on. Slide the baby in like that, and the pressure of the clamp and the interference fit, and you can trim this so it's a little more even, but the interference fit will hold it in there. It ain't coming out. And the wiring on this. Now, here's something. Well, this one's got these nice lugs to solder onto. Well, here's what I do with these. Here's the first one I did. Basically, 2 pieces of shrink wrap tubing to identify polarity, and then twist them around and form a lug. And you solder your wires onto that. So on the surface here, you have what looks, hey, that looks so original. I like that original look. Underneath is obvious there's a new capacitor that has been restored. So that's what you end up with. And I started doing this, like I say, because of the high cost of finding stuff that fits. Actually, I'm going to continue doing this. I don't see any reason why it would fail. If it's soldered in well and held mechanically in place, they should last years and years. And so here, I'm going to leave you with a question, and you restorers out there. Here's an old tech cap. This lasted 50 some years. Is this little cap of the same value or greater going to last 50 years? We don't know. So you want something that's easy to replace. And that's the, so think about this. Will it last? Maybe not. Down the road, you don't want to leave a mess for someone. I come into enough of those on these. So here's a situation where you'd easily be able to clip the old cap out here, this replacement, take it off the chassis, put a new one in the same way, and solder on. Let's say, 25 or 30 years down the road. Anyway, there you go. I hope it wasn't too long-winded. Thanks for watching and listening.